The cypress trees stood in water the color of rust-stained brass, their roots exposed by a drought that had lasted 43 days. Claire Brennan counted the days by the waterline marks on the dock pilings. Each one another inch of lake bed revealed, another day closer to something her family didn't talk about. She'd driven 12 hours from Austin when her Uncle Ray called about her sister. Mara had been missing for 6 days. The sheriff's department had dragged sections of Stillwater Lake, found nothing. Her uncle's voice on the phone had carried a quality Claire recognized from childhood, the particular flatness people used when they were lying by omission. "She went out on the water," Ray had said, "didn't come back." "And you waited 6 days to call me?" "We were handling it." Claire pulled up to the family property at sunset, when the light turned everything the color of old blood. The house was a century-old structure built on pilings, high enough to survive the occasional flood but low enough that you could hear the lake breathing at night. She'd grown up here, had left at 18 and visited exactly twice in the 14 years since. Ray was waiting on the porch. He was 60 now, weathered by sun and work, built like a man who'd spent his life doing physical labor. He watched her get out of the car with an expression that suggested he'd been hoping she wouldn't come. "Claire. Where's Mara?" "Don't know. Like I said. She went out on the water." "Yeah, I heard." Claire walked past him into the house. It smelled the same: cypress, mildew, fish, the particular smell of a building that had been too close to water for too long. "What aren't you telling me?" Ray followed her inside. "You want a beer?" "I want to know what happened to my sister." He opened 2 beers anyway, set them on the kitchen table, sat down heavily in a chair that creaked under his weight. Claire remained standing, arms crossed, waiting for the explanation she knew he'd been rehearsing since he called her. "Water's low," Ray said finally. "Real low. Lowest it's been since '05. Claire waited. Outside, cicadas started their evening chorus, a sound she'd forgotten during her years away. A sound that used to mean summer and safety and home. Now it just sounded like warning. "Things happen when the water gets low," Ray continued, turning the beer can in his hands without drinking. "Old things. Things that should stay buried under the lake don't stay buried when there's not enough water to hold them down. Your daddy knew about it. His daddy before him. Goes back further than anyone's kept proper records." "What things?" Ray drank half his beer in silence, staring at the table like he was reading something written in the grain of the wood. When he finally spoke again, his voice had dropped to the particular register people used when discussing family secrets that should have stayed buried. "You remember your Aunt Caroline?" Claire did. Aunt Caroline had drowned when Claire was 8. They'd found her body 3 days later, caught in the cypress roots near the eastern shore. The funeral had been closed casket. "She went out when the water was low," Ray said. "Just like Mara. Just like your grandmother in '52. Just like my father before that." "You're saying this happens regularly?" "Every 20 years or so. When the drought gets bad enough, the lake drops, and something down there," he gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the water beyond, "wakes up, gets hungry, takes one of ours." Claire sat down. "One of ours?" "Brennan's. Always Brennan's. Been that way since before we had the name written down. My granddaddy said his granddaddy told stories about it. Said it goes back to when the lake formed, when the loggers dammed the river and flooded the forest. Said there was something in those woods that didn't appreciate being drowned, something old." "And you believe that?" Ray looked at her. "Doesn't matter if I believe it. Matters that it happens. Every time the water drops below the 8-foot mark, one of us goes missing. And when they come back..." "When they come back?" He finished his beer, crushed the can. "Caroline came back. 3 days we looked for her. Then she walked out of the lake on the 4th morning, soaking wet, didn't say a word. We thought it was a miracle, thought we'd gotten lucky. But she wasn't right. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just stood at the window staring at the water. Started smelling like the lake. Not fish, not rot, but something else. Something wrong. And her eyes. Ray stood up, walked to the window. Her eyes were the color of the lake. That brass rust color, like she had lake water inside her instead of blood. Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. What happened to her? She went back. Week after we found her, she walked into the lake and didn't come out. We didn't look for her that time, just let her go. Jesus Christ, Ray. I'm telling you so you understand. So you don't go out there looking for Mara. Because if she's been gone 6 days, she's either dead or she's coming back wrong. And either way. He turned to face her. There's nothing you can do about it. Claire stood up. Where's the boat? She went out at dawn, when the mist hung thick over the water and you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Ray hadn't tried to stop her. He just watched from the porch with that same flat expression, the look of a man who'd seen this before and knew how it ended. The water was shallow enough that Claire could see the lake bed in places. Old trees still standing where they drowned 100 years ago, their branches reaching up through the murk like skeletal hands. The cypress forest had receded, revealing mud flats and root systems that should have stayed underwater. The smell changed as she went deeper, not fish or algae, but something mineral and ancient, like air trapped underground for centuries. It made her throat tight. She passed through sections where the exposed lake bed showed patterns, stones in circles, tree roots bent into shapes that might have been deliberate. Older than anyone could date, old enough that they'd been underwater for a century. She found the boat 3 hours in, pulled up on a mudbank. Mara's boat. She recognized the hand-painted name on the stern, Ophelia. No sign of Mara. Claire beached her own boat and stepped onto the mud. It was soft, wrong-textured, like stepping on something that was halfway between earth and flesh. The smell was overwhelming, decay and minerals and something organic that shouldn't be exposed to air. She found the first body 20 yards inland. Not Mara, someone older, a man maybe, though it was hard to tell. The corpse was half buried in the mud, and it had been in the water a long time, but that wasn't what made Claire stop breathing. It was the way the body was positioned, not lying down, standing, embedded in the mud as if it had walked out of the lake and simply kept walking until it sank. The arms were raised slightly, hands reaching forward. And its eyes were open, brass rust colored, staring. Claire backed away and nearly fell over another one. A woman this time, also standing, her body preserved in that same wrong way, not bloated or skeletal, but somewhere in between. Her dress was rotted but recognizable as clothing from decades past. Her brass rust eyes tracked Claire's movement. Tracked. The eyes had moved. Not much, but they had moved. The woman was dead, had been dead for years, but something in those eyes was still aware. And beyond her, dozens more scattered across the exposed lake bed, all facing the same direction. Some were fresher than others. Claire could make out faces, the markers of when they'd been taken. Toward a depression in the mud shaped like a mouth, 15 feet across, edges irregular and organic, descending into darkness. The sides were slick and ribbed, and as Claire watched, they contracted slightly, a slow swallowing motion. Claire understood then what Ray had meant. Something lived down there. Something that woke when the water dropped, and it could breathe. Something that had been taking Brennans for generations, pulling them into the lake, transforming them into whatever these standing corpses were, adding them to its collection. They were trophies, markers, or maybe just the remains of its feeding, left standing as warnings or promises or simple territorial display. She heard movement behind her, the wet sliding sound of something moving through mud. Turned. Mara stood 30 feet away, soaking wet despite 6 days of drought, her clothes plastered to her body. Her hair hung in ropes, water dripped from her fingertips into the mud, making soft splashing sounds that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence of the exposed lake bed. Mara? Her sister didn't respond, didn't blink, just stood there, and Claire could see it now, the brass rust color spreading through Mara's eyes like ink in water, starting at the pupils and bleeding outward into the whites. The way her skin had taken on a translucent quality, showing the network of veins beneath, all of them carrying something that looked less like blood and more like lake water. The way she moved wrong when she took a step forward, not walking but gliding, her feet not quite leaving the mud, just sliding across its surface as if the distinction between Mara's body and the lake bed was becoming negotiable. "Mara, it's me. It's Claire," her voice cracked. "We're going home. I came to take you home." Mara's mouth opened. Water poured out. Not a little. Gallons of it. A continuous stream that shouldn't fit inside a human body, pouring from her throat as if she were a vessel that had been filled to the brim and was now emptying. The water was dark, stained, the color of the lake in its deepest parts, and it carried things with it. Small writhing shapes that might have been larvae or leeches or something that had no name. When it stopped, when the last of the water had drained onto the mud at her feet, Mara spoke. "Go home." The voice was Mara's but layered with something else underneath. Something vast and patient and very, very old. Each word reverberated, as if it were being spoken in a space much larger than her body could contain. "This is the price. This is what we pay. Always have. Always will. Blood and water. Same thing in the end." "No," Claire took a step forward. "You're coming with me. We're leaving." "Can't leave." Mara tilted her head in a way that suggested the neck was no longer connected properly to the spine. "Bound here. Blood and water. Same thing in the end." More shapes were rising from the mud now, the standing corpses, moving with that same long gliding motion, circling Claire. She recognized some of them from old photographs, relatives who'd supposedly drowned, whose bodies had or hadn't been found, whose disappearances the family had accepted with that same flat resignation. The Brennan family tree, animated, surrounding her. "One stays," Mara said. "One always stays. That's the deal. That's what keeps it sleeping when the water rises. But when the water falls," she gestured at the depression in the mud, the mouth-shaped thing, "it wakes, it hungers, and we feed it." "I'm not feeding it, my sister." "Not your choice. Never was." Mara glided closer. "But you can make a trade. You stay. I go. Blood for blood. That's acceptable. That's allowed." Claire looked at her sister, at what her sister had become, looked at the standing corpses circling closer, looked at the depression in the mud, which was beginning to move, to shift, something rising from below. She ran. Didn't think, didn't plan, just ran for her boat, mud sucking at her boots, the corpses gliding after her with that horrible patient inevitability. She reached the boat, shoved off, the outboard motor catching on the third pull, and she aimed for open water without looking back. Behind her, Mara's voice, layered, vast, patient, called across the water. "You'll come back. They always come back." Claire didn't look back until she'd reached the family dock. Ray was waiting on the porch. "You saw her," he said, not a question. "Yeah. And I left her there." Ray nodded, pulled 2 beers from the cooler, handed her one. They sat in silence and watched the sun set over Caddo Lake, turning the water the color of old brass. "She'll come to the house," Ray said eventually. "In a week, maybe 2. They always do, and we'll have to make a choice." "What choice?" "Same choice we always make. Let her walk back into the lake or..." He paused. "Give her someone else to take instead." Claire drank her beer. It tasted like lake water. Everything here tasted like lake water eventually. "The drought's supposed to break next week," Ray continued. "Big storm coming, water rise. And when it does, whatever's down there will go back to sleep, for another 20 years or so, until the next drought. And then it'll take another one of us. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the lake breathe in the darkness below the house. Somewhere out there, Mara stood in the shallows with the other transformed relatives, waiting for the water to rise, waiting for the next generation to come looking for their missing, waiting to offer the same terrible choice. Claire finished her beer. "I'm leaving tomorrow." "Yeah," Ray said. "They all say that." Claire drove away the next morning, her car pointed toward Austin, toward her job and her apartment, and her life that didn't include lakes or family curses or sisters who came back wrong. She made it 30 miles before she had to pull over. Her hands were shaking on the wheel. She sat in a gas station parking lot and tried to convince herself she was making the right choice, that leaving was survival. But Ray's words kept echoing. They always come back. And she knew, understood with cold certainty, that if she left now, the lake would eventually reach out beyond its boundaries, would find her in Austin or wherever she'd run. The thing in the lake bed didn't need her to be physically present. It had her blood. That was enough. The curse wasn't geographical. It was hereditary. She could run to California or Alaska, and it wouldn't matter. The lake would call, and she would come back. Better to come back now. Better to stay close, to watch the water, to understand the pattern. She turned the car around. The drive back to Stillwater Lake felt longer than the drive away, each mile a choice she couldn't unmake. By the time she pulled up to the house, the sky had turned the color of old bruises, storm clouds building to the west exactly as the forecast had predicted. She found Ray on the porch where she'd left him, as if he'd been waiting, as if he'd known. He had 2 beers ready, condensation running down the cans in the humid air. "Changed your mind," he said. "Didn't change anything. Just realized I don't have a choice." Claire sat down beside him, took the offered beer. It was already warm. "It's in the blood, isn't it? The lake, the thing, whatever you want to call it. It's not about staying or leaving. It's about being a Brennan." Ray nodded slowly. "Your grandmother figured that out in '72, tried to move to Oregon, made it 2 years before the drought came and she started hearing it in her dreams, lake calling her home. She drove back, walked into the water during the night. We found her 3 days later, standing on the lake bed like all the others. Why didn't anyone tell me? When I left for college, when I moved to Austin, why didn't you tell me this was waiting?" "Would you have believed it?" Ray asked. "Would you have stayed?" Claire had no answer for that. "Besides," Ray continued, "some things you gotta learn yourself. Some burdens you gotta choose to carry. I told you now because Mara's gone and you needed to understand why. But I couldn't tell you before because..." He paused, took a long drink. "Because maybe you'd be the one who got out. Maybe the lake wouldn't want you. Maybe you'd be the exception. But I'm not." "No," Ray said. "You're not." Ray nodded, pulled out 2 more beers. "Storm's coming tonight, big one. Water rise 6 feet if the forecast's right. That'll be enough." "Enough for what?" "Enough to put it back to sleep. And when it sleeps, the ones it's taken." He gestured vaguely toward the lake. "They go quiet. Stay in the deep water. Don't come around the house. Until the next drought. Until the next drought." That night, the storm came in hard. Wind and rain that made the old house creak on its pilings. Waves that slapped against the dock with enough force to shake the boards. Claire and Ray sat in the dark living room and watched lightning illuminate Stillwater Lake in strobing bursts. During one flash, Claire saw them, the standing corpses, dozens of them, walking into the deeper water as it rose. Mara was among them, her brass rust eyes reflecting the lightning, her body gliding into the lake that had claimed her. By morning, the water had risen 8 feet. The exposed lake bed was submerged again. The cypress roots vanished back beneath the surface. The mouth-shaped depression was drowned under fresh rain. Stillwater Lake looked normal again, peaceful, like nothing terrible lived in its depths. Claire stayed 3 more days, until she was certain the water would hold, and then she drove back to Austin with the understanding that she'd be back in 20 years, maybe less, when the next drought came, when the lake dropped and something ancient woke hungry. And when that happened, someone from the family would go missing. Maybe her niece, if Mara had children before the lake took her. Maybe a cousin, maybe Claire herself. The Brennan family would gather, would lie to the sheriff, would wait to see if the missing came back wrong, and someone would make the same choice Claire had made, to run, to stay, to watch the water and wait for the storm that would put the horror back to sleep. It was the price. It was what they paid. It always had been.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.